Father Gregory Pine.
And this is Father Bonaventure Chapman.
And welcome to Godsplaining. Thanks to all those who support us. If you enjoy the show, please consider making a monthly donation on Patreon. Be sure to like and subscribe to Godsplaining wherever you listen to your podcasts. For this episode of Guestsplaining, we are very delighted to be joined by Dr. Edward Fr. Thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Oh, so great to be with you all.
So all of our listeners know who you are. All of our listeners' house pets know who you are. But there's a slight chance that like the friends of our listeners' house pets who come from down the block and are like listening on the episode right now by accident don't know you. So for those house pets, the related house pets, would you say a word of introduction, who you are, where you're from, and what type of work or apostolate you're engaged in?
Great. Dr. Edward Fr. I am married to a wonderful woman, Beth. We just celebrated our 24th wedding anniversary. We have 8 children. My first one's married. So 20, 22, all the way down to our little 7-year-old Eleanor. So we have a full house. That's my main life. My main job, I work with Focus, the Fellowship of Catholic University Students, as Senior Vice President of Apostolic Outreach. So basically overseeing all of what the mission, the heart of the mission things that they do, whether it's campus or what they're doing on collegiate outreach in Europe, to the United States, to Mexico, to what we're doing with parishes. So we're serving parishes as well, and our mission trips and conferences and things. So I work in that area. The heart of what we do is formation. So that's what I'm helping to bring across all the different aspects of the apostolate is bringing the Catholic intellectual tradition to bear in ordinary daily life in apostolic work and evangelization. So that's my main job. I serve as a part-time professor at the Augustine Institute here in Denver. So I live in Denver. Both these apostolates are here. And I like to write. I love writing. So I've written many books, and I lead pilgrimages. I have my own podcast, All Things Catholic. And my wife says I have 10 jobs. So I won't go through all those 10, but there we go.
Nice. People will sometimes ask how many like full-time jobs / part-time jobs one has. And then you realize the limitations of language because you're like, I'm thinking about them all the time, but I'm not working on them all the time. So they're kind of like full-time, part-time jobs, but I like them and I don't feel ground under by them. But this explanation is becoming too long, so hard to sort out exactly how many jobs one has. Father Bonaventure, you had a thought?
Yeah, well, I did. So I'm excited, Dr. Fr, to actually meet you or something, because I use your book in marriage prep. So here's another, Man and Woman and the Mystery of Love, which is fantastic. It's key insights from Love and Responsibility. We're going to talk about another book, I think, on this. But I've always thought, I remember when I was a Catholic convert, and I read Love and Responsibility by St. John Paul II. I thought that changed my life. Just an incredible book. It's like a great book, account on love and what it means to be human with each other. And I wanted to give that to people for marriage prep when I prep couples, but I haven't yet gotten myself to do it. I think because of charity. So I was so excited to find your. Yeah, it's super serious book. One of the sections on sexology or something. It's really good. But your book has provided at least it's helped them, I think, and helped me feel good about giving them a little bit of JP2, because it's a nice introduction for them about what that book is about, and then shows them the other readings of it. So until I really get up the gumption to just punish them, your book is the one that I use. So I'm very excited about talking to you, and it's a great resource. So thank you for making that accessible for people who use it in the pews, you could say.
Father, I don't know if you do work in marriage enrichment, like after, I don't know how much accompaniment you're able to do afterwards.
None.
My wife and I we wrote a book that's kind of a follow-up to that. It's for the person that's been married, 3 years, 3 kids, or 7 years, where the realities of marriage, like you can go in with all these starry eyes of theology of the body. I'm going to make my life a gift for this other person. And we love Jesus. We're Catholic, we'll have troubles, but not like the rest of the world. And then you're humbled when you realize how hard it is. I'm sure similar to even entering Dominican community life, right? Your humanity comes out in all these hard ways, and you're humbled, and it's really hard. And I think couples need to hear that encouraging message that's actually part of the process. Not to freak out when you're hurt by your spouse, or when you go through seasons of you don't feel close. That's actually normal. It means the sacrament's working and God's calling you to a deeper love. So I'll just plant that seed.
It's great.
as another resource there.
Perfect.
So, apropos of the maybe disappointment or bemusement that happens when you enter or you embark upon your state of life, I think I expected that with each year of religious life, I would kind of progress to a higher mansion in St. Teresa of Avila's description of the life of prayer. So I was like, year one, mansion one, year two, mansion two, you see how this goes. And part of my kind of disappointment / bemusement is coming to discover that I might be just as bad at prayer, if one can speak such a sentence, now as I was 13 years ago when I entered. But fortunately, there are good resources out there for learning how to pray and that encourage you in the life of prayer. And you just wrote a recent book about just this theme. Would you tell us a little bit about it?
Oh, I'm so excited. In fact, I just got my copy a week ago. So here it is. There it is. It's called When You Pray, Trust, Surrender, and the Transformation of Your Soul. And you know where that is. That's beautiful Assisi. I love that picture. This is the first time I ever got from a publisher. They sent me a cover. And do you have any comments? I was like, that's amazing. Can I just frame it? It's just beautiful cover. But the book is, it's called When You Pray. And it's about not so much like here. I have a chapter on like practical tips to get started in prayer for those that, are not as familiar with the life of prayer. But it's not as much about how to pray as much as it is about what God is doing in your soul when you pray and the journey he wants to take us on in our interior lives and how to cooperate with his graces and meet him in the many challenges that come up. Like we talked about marriage, we talked about religious life and even our relationship with God, that there's going to be times where we feel like I stink at prayer. I don't feel close to God in prayer. I'm just distracted. I'm restless. And I wonder, am I getting anything out of this? Is my prayer pleasing to the Lord? I tell a story. In fact, we were, you all know Father Paul Murray in Rome. He was the great Dominican spiritual theologian and was I took so many classes from him when I was doing my studies at the Angelica many years ago. But he became a good friend, a spiritual director. He was the priest of our wedding. But he shares this story in a little book he wrote about Mother Teresa. And in the book, he tells the story of how he was in the chapel and he was having one of those moments of just feeling like, okay, I was here for this holy hour, but I wasn't really here to God. Was this worth it? And then the holy hour ends and they leave the chapel. He and Mother Teresa walking out and they're talking about the sisters and the retreat that they're doing. And Father didn't say anything about his little struggle in prayer, but but all of a sudden Mother Teresa just stops while they're walking and looks him in the eye and says, Father, never leave the chapel feeling discouraged, feeling like your prayer, wasn't worth it or that you accomplished nothing. Says no matter what happens in the chapel, we can always give God our nothing. We can give him even that feeling of inadequacy that, I tried, but I fell short. But we can even give God that. And then they went on and she starts talking about the retreat, but she was reading his soul. He didn't say anything about this, but I love that line, give God your nothing, because as you know, Aquinas, he talks about, like, when he talks about prayer, he talks about how the intention to pray is foundational. We might not be able to maintain attention. We're not angels. We're human beings. We'll have moments of distraction and our mind wandering. So we might not be able to keep attention, but if we go into our prayer with a good intention, that's still something beautiful that we can give to God. And then intention kind of pervades the whole time of prayer. If it's a good intention. I'm not saying I show up, and I have all my notifications on in the chapel and I'm just, checking email. That's not a good intention. But if I'm really sincere, Lord, I really want to give you this time. I want to give you my best. And then even if it, turns out I feel like it's a mess, it's still, I'm giving God that good intention.
Well, a little rhyme there. I'm reminded, Dr. Shri, of St. Augustine when he talks about wanting to want God. Sometimes wanting to want is enough, or it's a good place to start. And if we don't want to pray, if we don't want to sit down with God at this particular moment, we can want to sit down with God. We can say, I want to be here, even though I want to be here, even though I don't want to be here at this moment. I was thinking, though, as we get more and farther away from Christendom and the model of people understanding what Christianity is, even, I'm convicted that many people out there in the world, and especially in America and other places, just are giving up. They don't even know the basics, you could say. Prayer is going to be something stranger and stranger to people. Whereas before, say 50 years ago, even if you weren't Catholic, you'd still pray, and everyone knew the Our Father. A lot of people did, at least. And it wouldn't make sense. And praying before meals was something that people would do as well. Whereas people are getting more and more, I think, forgetting how to do it, even Christians, and the point of it. So in the very base, before we talk about the specifics in the book, when someone would approach you, or in these formation, you're doing formation of students for Focus, and say, well, why pray? What does it do? What's it for? What's going on? What do you have like a short little elevator pitch that you give on this, or is it such a befuddling question that it's just like, what would you say to someone who says, well, why pray?
Yeah. All right. I'm going to give my general answer, and then I might tailor it to somebody. If I'm like a total postmodern, there's no idea, I might steer it, in a certain direction. But the general answer is, first of all, I would say, why do we pray? Because out of justice, right? The virtue of religion, where we owe it to God. We owe God our worship, our time, we should praise him, thank him, tell him we're sorry, all those things. That's just a part of, our relationship with God, first and foremost. Secondly, we pray because it's good for our souls. We were made for prayer. I love that line, from the liturgy, even the desire, to praise you is itself a gift, So I love that we were made for this, and that's where we're going to find our fulfillment. The other thing is, in prayer, this is where we find our transformation, is if I take time each day, not just saying prayers, not just doing devotions, like the Rosary or Divine Mercy Chapel, which are awesome. I hope we have that. But I'm not talking about just saying prayers, even Liturgy of the Hours, which is, liturgical prayers. Beautiful. We should have that in our lives if we can. That's great. But I'm about, do we have that quiet time for intimate daily conversation with God every day? St. Teresa of Avila, you mentioned earlier, Father Gregory, is, in the mansions. I was just there actually in Avila with my wife for our 24th anniversary. I took her to Lisieux. We got to pray at the tomb of St. Therese, and then my wife loves John of the Cross. She just is passionate about John of the Cross. She reads everything on John of the Cross. And if John of the Cross wasn't a saint, I might be jealous because she just gets so excited about John of the Cross. But we went and walked in his footsteps. We got to go to Avila, and they have where she's the convent where she entered. They have these 9 Roman numerals in the little plaza outside, and symbolizing those 9 mansions, those deep levels of the interior life. And we can contemplate, where are we? But Teresa of Avila says, you know what, if you're not praying every day in meditation, mental prayer, with Lectio Divina, Ignatian meditation, you're not even at the first level. You're still on the outside, so we have to have that daily prayer. And it's good for our souls, because that's where we end up being changed by God. And then I would say a third thing. So we owe it to God. Secondly, it's good for our souls and our transformation. But thirdly, it's good for the other people around us. This is the big point. I will say, I just gave some talks at the Steubenville conference on the new book just this last weekend. And this point really resonated with so many people. I highlighted how we need the other people in our life are dependent on us praying. And if we don't have an interior life, we won't be able to give the best of ourselves. Like to my wife, my wife needs me to pray. Like she can tell, like some days if I'm just a little cranky or something, goes, did you get your prayer time in today? But I need Christ radiating through me. I need his life, love. In other words, I love Beth, but my love for her falls short because I have pride and selfishness and impatience and all these little weaknesses that come out. She needs Christ loving her through Christ loving through me. And my kids need that. My kids are dependent on me having a deep interior life. If I don't have a prayer life, I can only give myself, and the best of myself isn't me. The best of myself is Christ in me. So, all right. So long answer, Father Bonaventure, to the big 3 things I always say. We owe it to God. It's good for our transformation. But thirdly, the people around us need us to pray. I will not be a good husband, as good as I need to be, if I'm not praying. My children will suffer the effects of a father that doesn't have a deep interior life. So I need to pray for the sake of the people in my life. That's the big answer. Now, I think you were getting at, what if there was just like some college student that didn't grow up in a Christian space, and they're like, what is this all about? I'm probably starting really basic at that point. I'm hoping that they at least believe in God. Let's use that as just a basic starting point. I think for them, I would talk to them. I would use this line. It's in the Catechism. That prayer is just a close sharing between friends, and just like I want to have a friendship with my wife. I want to know her heart. I want to share what's going on in my life. That helps our relationship. If I want a good friendship with God, I need to actually have time to talk to him. Now, what does that look like? What does that mean? I mean, does he hear my prayers? I go, well, if he's God, he's all powerful and all knowing. He's capable of hearing a million people's prayers all at the same time because he's God. I know it might be hard for us to understand. Those are some questions that come up, but they're probably it's more mysterious for them. They've never done it before.
Mm-hmm.
So the number one thing I think I would do with them is rather than just talk about prayer, I would invite them, said, can I just lead us in a short little prayer right now? Just give you a sense of what that's like. I'll share with you how I do it. And I wouldn't necessarily use Our Father, or Hail Mary, although I do these every prayer life. I would just talk to God, and I would take time to listen. I might pull out a Bible verse and do a little Lectio Divina with them. I think they need an experience. This is what we see in Focus, is that when young people get the experience of prayer more than the teaching, they need the teaching. But when they get an experience of a Focus missionary walking through how to do Lectio Divina, praying in front of the Blessed Sacrament, that's what's most impactful.
Okay, that's great.
Okay, so I'm thinking of, a committed Christian. Let's stick with high school or college. Focus will sometimes describe the transformation of the students whom they serve on campus by this like win, build, send triptych. So I'm thinking of somebody kind of in the build stage who's really, really desirous of having a deep interior life, but experiences much in the way of disappointment or much in the way of even disillusionment. And like they really want to get the most out of prayer. They really want to get the most out of Mass, and they're trying to find ways by which to do so. But they kind of feel it in themselves. They feel a kind of fragility, like if I can't kind of crack this nut, or if I can't find a kind of hack for it, then I'm just nervous that I'm gonna kind of give in or just capitulate or just give it up entirely because it's too demanding. It's too exigent. It just places too much of a claim on my humanity. And this experience of continually failing it's just brutal. So a person in that type of situation, the insights in the book, or maybe some of the insights from the saints whom you cover in the context of the book, what are words that apply in those situations or for those particular lives?
Well, I would say those issues I need to be encouraged in because I've had a few times where I feel like my prayer isn't going well. So a couple of things I would want to highlight is, let's see, first of all, whatever feelings we get from prayer is not the center of our prayer life. I think that's important to measure. Like if there was a thermometer for my spiritual life and I wanted to check, am I growing in my spiritual life? I don't check feelings. When God blesses us with a consolation where we feel close to him, or I feel like I'm getting something out of this, I get some insight into my life, or I understand something, whatever that is, like I come away from prayer. And when people say I have good prayer, I was a good time in the chapel, I think they're talking about the feelings they get out of prayer. And those are gifts. And we thank the Lord when that happens. But just like any relationship, it's not about the feelings. Like in my marriage, it's, there's those great, I get to take my wife on date night, we're on pilgrimage recently. It's awesome. Then there's other times where we just got kids waking up at 2 a.m. We just got to work. We got to serve, or she's sick, or in a bad mood, or whatever's going on. And it's not about the feelings. And real love resides in the will. And so it's the act of the will, right? The commitment of the will to will the good of the other. And if I love God, it's not about how many feelings I have, it's my faithfulness. I think that's one big point I would highlight, is being faithful, loyal, even when I don't get feelings out of it, even when it's hard, it feels like drudgery, simply showing up. That might be a more powerful gift I'm offering God than in those moments when I have all this delight in prayer and it's awesome. I'm going to share with you, there's a quote. I shared this at the Steubenville conference, and so many people just came back and said, "Oh, Dr. give me that quote again." Because I could tell this quote from St. Faustina really resonated. I quote her where she's writing about those times when you have spiritual delight and then those times of just great dryness and you feel like you've accomplished nothing. She says, "One act of trust at such moments, those moments of darkness, dryness, and prayer, one act of trust in such moments gives greater glory to God than whole hours passed in prayer filled with consolations." I think that's because, again, if you remember what love is, love, like when you have to sacrifice, when you have to work hard at it and serve someone else, it actually means more than just, oh, that was easy and it was fun. I got a lot out of it. And we're actually, in a sense, proving our love to God by just being faithful and showing up. And that's what the saints are going to say over and over again, is that how important it is that we just remain faithful to prayer. Now, still, what's going on? And this is where you'll love this, because Saint Catherine of Siena just has some great insights on this. She wrote a letter once where she's addressing this, like, why is it that it's so hard? I want to pray, I love God, and but I'm going through, I feel like I'm just going through the motions. I don't feel like he's there. I don't think I'm good at this. Like, why is it so hard? If I want to pray, God wants me to pray. Why is it so difficult sometimes? And she says, sometimes it's the devil who's discouraging us. The devil discouraging us. That the devil knows how powerful prayer is. He knows how important it is. And so he'll do anything he can to get us to stop praying. He'll even use discouragement. He'll use our sincere desire to pray well. Like, I want to pray well. I want to be close to God. And my acute awareness that I'm not really good at this and I don't feel close to God. And he'll use that to get us to think, I stink at prayer. This isn't worth it anymore. I'm not good at prayer. I'm not getting anything out of this. I don't feel it. Like those voices aren't coming from God. They're coming from the devil. And he wants to do everything he can to discourage us, to think it's not worth it. Why bother? You stink at this. It's not pleasing to God. And Catherine makes that point. No, your prayer, if, like, coming back to what we said earlier, if we come with the right intention, it is beautiful to God. It is pleasing, but the devil gets us to think it's not. I share a story in the book here about, true story, my kids, when it was Mother's Day a number of years ago, and they went and got Beth some flowers to put into a vase. Now, they didn't go to the store. They're little kids. They just went into the field behind our house here. And they didn't get her flowers, nice, beautiful roses. They got her some weeds. And it wasn't even those nice, pretty yellow dandelions. Like, those kind of look cute, No, these are those, like, thorny, spiky, ugly weeds that look like they came out of Mordor or something, right? And they put these weeds in this nice, really beautiful vase, and they're waiting for her to come down in the morning. She comes down, they rush to her, and Beth sees the weeds in a vase, and she just smiles. And she says, "Thank you so much. This is awesome." She gives them a big hug. Now, what's she doing? Is she rejoicing over the spiky, thorny, from hell weeds? No, she's rejoicing in the hearts of the daughter. She sees that my daughters are thinking of me and they want to give me a present. That's what she sees. And I think that's important for us to know, that in our prayer life, whatever's in our vase that we give to God, it might be beautiful roses someday, we feel like, and other times it feels like these horrible weeds. But what's most important is not what's in the vase. It's mostly it's my heart and the gift that I'm giving. And we want to get our prayer better, and we can talk about that as well. But I think it's important we just keep that in mind, that it's the devil that's discouraging us to think you stink. It wasn't worth it. It's not pleasing to God. So that's the point Catherine makes. One last thing I'll say from Catherine is that she also says it's not just the devil. It could be sometimes something God's doing. That God, she says, in one of her dialogues, mystical dialogues, God's speaking to her, and God says, "I sometimes pretend not to hear your prayers." Which is a funny line. Like, why is God doing that? Well, sometimes God will withdraw his sense of his closeness to us, pretend like he's not hearing. He really is. I want to be clear. He's always close to us in prayer, and he's always hearing our prayers. But he doesn't always give us those feelings of delight, because he's testing our hearts to see, will we still come? Am I coming just for those feelings, those insights, or am I coming for him? And she also has this wonderful line where she talks about how God like comes and goes. It's like, she says it's a lover's game. So absent makes the hearts grow fonder. And where God, when we don't sense his presence, our deeper desires, which are for him, come out more. Like, our desires aren't ultimately for consolation and for feelings. They're ultimately for God himself. And when he withdraws the sweetness of the spiritual life, it makes us, be more in touch with the deeper desires in our souls, which are for God and God alone. And so it's a normal process in the spiritual life for us to have seasons where we don't feel close to him. And it might be not me praying badly. It might not be the devil rattling me and discouraging me. It might be actually God himself, the loving bridegroom, withdrawing a sense of his presence, but it doesn't mean he's not there. That's what she says. She goes, "I might withdraw my feelings, but my grace is still there. I'm testing your heart to see, will you still come?"
Yeah, this is, and to tie this to St. John of the Cross, he of course takes up this Song of Songs, the spiritual canticle, and talks about the dynamics of the lover and the beloved and the chase involving these things that has to have distance before they have a union. And he goes through, of course, developing this. So this notion that God will seem as if not hearing or seem as if abandoned to draw one's heart to search harder, in panting after, as the deer pants after the stream, so I long for you. But we say that as well. we're saying those words. So I think you're right. It's important to remember that God cares about the intention, the heart is what really matters, not particularly the content. At the same time, that's a good encouragement for all us beginners, and we're all kind of beginners in prayer, since prayer is loving conversation with God, and that really only happens face to face, I suspect, in beatitude. At the same time, we should not be surprised that it's hard and it takes a while to get started and to be good at it, because it's hard to talk. It takes for a while to learn as a child how to actually talk confidently with someone and speak, and you get to learn that by mimicking others and paying attention and watching others and learning language from those others. And the master rhetoricians are ones who have a command of all sorts of experiences and examples. And I think the saints, this is a beautiful thing about Catholics, is we have master prayers. We have people who are master orators with God and have communicated. And some saints appeal to some, their prayer life, and other saints appeal to others. Faustina, for me, if I want to know and learn how to pray, I read her diary and spend time with that. But they're master prayers that we can mimic and imitate. It sounds like in this book there's a lot of examples from these master prayers. Are there particular prayers that you found helpful, or are there a bunch in here for different people, different strokes for different folks, that kind of thing? What do you have to say about the master prayers, the hermeneutics of prayer, you could say?
Oh, yeah. I have a lot of different saints we cover in here. I love your analogy about like a child. It takes time to learn how to talk. It takes even longer, Father, for a child to learn how to listen. And anytime that's what we're like little kids, and we're learning how to talk to God, but then the real art is learning to listen and allow him to lead us. And that's really what the book is at the heart is really all about, is helping us to grow in listening to God and then surrendering our lives to God, so we're being changed by him. Teresa of Avila, that's what she writes about, is that's every prayer, in the end, wherever you are and wherever you're in the mansions, whatever degree of prayer you're in, it ultimately is meant to lead us to give our lives more as a gift to God, whatever that is. So some of the different saints we look at, well, we've already talked about St. Teresa of Avila. I've mentioned John of the Cross. I have a whole section on John of the Cross, opening up for the average Catholic. He's often kind of intimidating and scary, and, he's like really intense, and he talks about the dark night of the soul. But I wanted the average Catholic to be aware of some of those deeper degrees of prayer and what might happen if you go through an intense kind of purgation and darkness that he describes. So I have something on that. But I use him also to talk about like the ordinary purgation that all Christians go through, and how he wants to purify he loves us so much. He doesn't just want us to experience this closely. He wants to heal us at the deepest levels. So all of our attachments, our imperfections, he wants to heal our emotions. We have rightly ordered desires. And that's, so this is where you get a little bit of, you all would love this, because it's a little Thomistic moral theology, which should be always seen in the mystical life as well, right? So I have like sections later in the book about that. Early on, I talk a lot about Mother Teresa and her spirituality of I thirst, as seeing that prayer is ultimately not about what I do and my performance. It's more God's initiative, and God's been thirsting for me. And if I have simply the desire to pray or to get better at prayer, to learn more about prayer, God put that desire there. So we look at her. We've already mentioned St. Catherine of Siena a lot. I'd use her a lot for a lot of the struggles that we have in prayer. St. John Paul II and St. Faustina. I have sections in the book. The book is arranged not according to saints, it's more according to themes. So it starts off with struggles in prayer, how to get started in prayer, and then it looks at this theme of trust and surrender. And I really use JP2, just a man of great confidence and courage. I mean, just like whenever you hear his voice on like an old video or something, aren't you just inspired? I mean, this is a man that he knows God, and he knows God's in charge no matter what's happening, whether it's the Nazis invading or the communists or what's happening with, heretics in the church when he was Pope, like he just has this amazing confidence in God. And when we have that confidence in God, it leads to this deeper inner peace. So St. Faustina, of course, Jesus, I trust in you, and the Divine Mercy Chaplet. So we use them as like that theme on trusting God, and not giving in to the many anxieties that are out there in the world today. There's sections on St. Therese of Lisieux, really big on the little way of evangelization and walking through. So basically what the book is, it's 30 short reflections. So you can call them chapters, but they're short reflections that are not, again, it's not a book about prayer. It's a book I hope people take to prayer, that they are encountering. It's really not my writings. I'm just assembling the great wisdom of the saints. And they learn in small bite-sized pieces who Therese was, what she struggled with, how she came to the little way. What is the little way really all about? How does it apply to my life? So we look at that. I have chapters on St. John Henry Newman, on if I want to live as a Christian and have a deep interior life in this world, I got to be very cautious about the ways of the mindset of the world, the ways of the world, how it keeps me from growing in the spiritual life. We looked at St. Benedict as an early Christian model of this, how he steps away from the ways of the world to go deeper so that he can then be a source of transformation to the world. And then finally, we look at saints like Bernard of Clairvaux, Saint Francis of Assisi, and a little bit of Catherine as well, on the real sign of holiness is not how many holy hours I do and how many rosaries I recite, but it's, do I radiate Christ to other people? And my love for the people right around me, my spouse, my children, the poor, the sick, like where we are reflecting the love of Christ. We're so transformed. So we look at, I love this line from Catherine of Siena when she, as you all know the story, but she was, had that time of solitude for 3 years. And then God says, I want you to go out back into the world and with the people of Siena. And she's like, oh no, I just want to be with you. And then she says, no, I'm going to teach you to walk with 2 feet now. 2 feet, not just 1 foot, love of God, but love of neighbor as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that gives you a little sense. There's many more saints we looked at, but those are probably some of the big ones.
Beautiful. So you mentioned the book, and then there are also resources that accompany it. Mindful that the episode will launch in late August. Do you have a prospective date for its release? And then upon release, where will folks be able to find it?
It's already out. People can get it right now at ascensionpress.com/whenyoupray. ascensionpress.com/whenyoupray. They have actually a free sample video. So you can get a sample, a taste of what the video study is. So the book stands on its own. You can use this for like a 30-day prayer challenge. I'm often challenging people to say, hey, if you have never had a consistent prayer life, or you used to, and you're not as consistent, and you need to kind of jumpstart your prayer life, you can use the 30 reflections as a guide for that. And you don't have to finish each reflection. It's not important that you read the book. It's more important that you talk to God for 30 days. But the book stands on its own, and is just something you could use for your own enrichment. It comes with a reflection question at the end of every reflection. There's something that you can take the wisdom of the saint and apply it to your life. But we did do this video study because there's not really a lot out there in the faith formation resource world on Catholic spirituality. There's many things on the Bible, the books of the Bible, things on marriage prep, RCIA, lots of great stuff there, but there's not as much on the themes of the saints and Catholic spirituality. So that is out as well, and they can get that at ascensionpress/whenyoupray, and that's where they can see the free video. So it comes with workbooks. You can use it in a small group. You could use it as a married couples group, a men's group, a women's group, a Bible study group. And so it comes with, you watch the video, and we filmed overseas at the sites of many of these saints, or the relics of the saints and places they lived. And so it kind of makes those saints come alive. So there's a little video reflection, and then you meet in a small group and then you talk about it together.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And it seems like, especially in this moment in the life of the church, it corresponds to a need that a lot of people feel. Obviously, there's always need for prayer. But sometimes, if like you kind of search things on the internet, you'll see, oh, wow, it looks like a lot of people are clicking on this or that. And I was just looking at the videos from the talks given at Seek this past year, and the talk given by Sister Mary Grace on, like kind of 7 tips for improving your life of prayer was enormously popular. Mm. So I think, a lot of people desire this intensity and intimacy in their relationship with the Lord. And it's always difficult to be patient as he visits us with his revelation and grace. And certainly anything that we can do to remove hindrances or obstacles to that life is, salutary. So thanks so much for writing the book, for putting together the resources, and thanks so much for joining us on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for all you all do. God bless.
Cheers. All right, turning then to you, the listener. Thanks so much for having tuned in to this episode of Godsplaining. If you would, follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. I think it's still called Twitter. I think the logo changed, but maybe the name will change at a certain point. Who knows? Everything's up in the air with that platform. It's like wild. If you would like the episode, subscribe on YouTube or your podcast app and leave a 5-star review, all of which helps to get the word out. And please, God will be instrumental in deepening the lives of prayer of those who tune in. If you'd like to donate to the podcast through Patreon, you can follow the link in the description or show notes. And in those same description and or show notes, you'll find links for merchandise and links for our upcoming events, the most pertinent of which is a young adults retreat to be held at the beginning of November. So it's November 3rd through 5th at Malvern Retreat House outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So we hope to meet you there. We hope to pray with you there. We hope to deepen our relationships begun on the podcast there. So that's all we have for you. Know of our prayers for you. Please pray for us, and we'll look forward to chatting with you next time